The land records in 3 American counties document a pattern that no state agency has formally acknowledged and that no mainstream publication has covered across the entire period during which it has been unfolding. Nye County, Nevada; Mohave County, Arizona; Costilla County, Colorado. Across the past 36 months, over 600 separate parcel purchases have been recorded in these 3 counties by limited liability companies formed within the previous 18 months, funded through payment structures that combine cash from multiple contributors, and registered to addresses across every major metropolitan area in the American West. The parcels are small, the purchases are quiet. The infrastructure being installed on the parcels is designed to remain invisible to satellite imagery, invisible to county building departments, and invisible to the surveillance ecosystem that has closed on every other form of nomadic living arrangement across the previous 3 years. Tonight we are going through the complete anatomy of what the American van life community has been quietly building across the desert Southwest since the enforcement wave of 2024 made conventional van life untenable across every metropolitan area in the American West. Every number in this documentary comes from public land records, public limited liability company filings, and the community forums where the participants coordinate their operations. Nothing about this is speculation. The hidden communities are real, the infrastructure is being installed, and the parallel society the American van life community is constructing across the desert Southwest is scaling faster than any state agency currently has the capacity to track. Let us get into it. The reason this is happening now has a documented answer that the previous 2 years of enforcement operations produced. When the Supreme Court decision in Grants Pass versus Johnson removed the primary legal argument against municipal anti-camping ordinances in June 2024, the van life community understood immediately that the operating environment that had defined the previous 15 years was ending. When over 47 American cities implemented or expanded parking restrictions across the following 18 months, the community understood that the enforcement infrastructure would continue expanding until conventional van life had been priced, ticketed, and impounded out of every metropolitan area that offered the amenities the arrangement required. When the license plate reader deployment reached 40,000 cameras across 5,000 American communities by the middle of 2025, the community understood that stealth arrangements had a defined operational lifetime, measured in months rather than years. And when the insurance industry began systematically excluding coverage for van life modifications, the community understood that the last structural support for the arrangement had been removed. The response was not passive. The response was the coordinated purchase of raw desert land, the formation of legal structures capable of protecting the ownership, and the construction of the hidden communities that this documentary is about. The land purchases are the first element of the system. Rural desert land across the American Southwest experienced a substantial price collapse across 2023 and 2024, as the pandemic-era real estate speculation that had inflated remote land prices reversed. Parcels of 5 to 40 acres that had traded in the $15,000 to $25,000 range during the 2020 to 2022 window collapsed into the $3,000 to $8,000 range across the following 2 years, and the van life community discovered that the coordinated purchase of adjacent or nearby parcels through pooled funding produced ownership stakes at price points comparable to the cost of a single month of overnight parking fees in the metropolitan areas the community had been priced out of. The parallel transaction data reflects the same collapse across the online land marketplace platforms that dominate rural desert sales, including LandWatch, Land.com, and the county-level tax auction inventories that regularly produce parcels at price points below $1,000 for buyers positioned to complete the acquisition within the compressed timelines the tax auction process requires. The community's coordinated participation in the tax auction process across the past 36 months has produced acquisition costs that regularly fall below the equivalent of 2 weeks of overnight parking fees in San Diego, Los Angeles, or Portland, and the members who complete the acquisitions retain the ownership across timelines measured in decades rather than the daily eviction cycle the metropolitan parking environment produces. The target counties. The community concentrated on share a common set of characteristics: substantial available inventory of raw desert parcels at price points below $5,000. Minimal county building code enforcement across parcels smaller than 40 acres. Legal frameworks that permit off-grid structures without requiring formal building permits, septic systems, or utility connections. And geographic isolation that produces the operational privacy the community's security protocols depend on. Nye County, Nevada, has emerged as the primary target across the past 24 months. The county covers over 18,000 square miles, which is larger than the state of New Jersey, and the county sheriff's department patrols that entire jurisdiction with a total force of 42 deputies. The building code enforcement operates through a complaint-driven system that requires an active complaint before any enforcement action begins. And the geographic dispersion of the parcels the community has been purchasing produces a complaint frequency approaching 0 across most of the affected areas. Land records for the county document over 230 parcel purchases by newly formed limited liability companies across the past 24 months at price points ranging from $2,700 for 5-acre parcels through $18,000 for 40-acre parcels. Mohave County, Arizona has produced similar transaction volumes at similar price points across the same period, and the parallel activity in Costilla County, Colorado, where the San Luis Valley provides substantial available inventory of 5 to 40-acre parcels at price points below the Nevada and Arizona ranges, has attracted the particular segment of the community that prioritizes access to Colorado's off-grid legal framework over the more permissive but more remote Nevada and Arizona alternatives. The legal structure is the second element of the system, and the sophistication that has developed across the past 3 years produces the invisibility that the entire arrangement depends on. The typical structure involves a limited liability company formed in a state that does not require member disclosure in public filings, most commonly Wyoming or New Mexico, which then acquires the land through a purchase agreement that is recorded in the county land records under the limited liability company name rather than under any individual member's name. The limited liability company operating agreement establishes membership interests for the contributors, defines the shared usage rights across the parcel or parcels the company owns, and establishes the internal governance structure that resolves disputes without requiring county courts. The membership interests can be purchased for cash contributions ranging from $500 for basic access rights through $5,000 for permanent residential rights on designated portions of the acquired land. And the participants who cannot afford the cash contributions can typically exchange labor for equivalent membership interests through the infrastructure construction work the limited liability companies coordinate across the first 18 months of operation. The parallel legal structure involves the community land trust model, which places the underlying land in a nonprofit trust while granting long-term leases to the individual members, producing the same operational outcome through a different legal instrument that offers additional protections against tax reassessment and property tax escalation across the ownership lifetime. The tax framework across the target counties reflects the low-value assessments that raw desert land carries under the county assessor systems, and the resulting annual property tax obligations across the acquired parcels range from $20 to $200 per year, depending on the parcel size and the specific assessment methodology the county employs. The community's operating agreements typically allocate the property tax obligation across the members proportional to their membership interests, producing individual tax obligations that regularly fall below the equivalent of a single parking ticket in the metropolitan environments the community has been priced out of. The parallel legal risk mitigation involves the systematic use of registered agent services in the LLC's state of formation, which prevents the individual members' home addresses from appearing in any public filing associated with the LLC and produces the operational privacy that the entire arrangement depends on for its continued protection against external legal action. The infrastructure being installed on the parcels represents the third element of the system, and the design principles reflect the operational requirements the community has developed across the past 3 years. The primary constraint is invisibility to satellite imagery, which drives the community's preference for structures that appear as natural terrain features when viewed from above. Earth bag construction using polypropylene bags filled with local soil and covered in adobe render produces structures that blend into the surrounding desert to the point where the standard satellite imagery resolution cannot distinguish the built structures from the natural landscape. Underground structures dug into hillsides and covered with the excavated soil produce even more complete invisibility at the cost of substantially higher construction labor. The parallel infrastructure required to support residential occupation includes water catchment systems designed to capture the limited desert rainfall, well systems drilled to depths ranging from 200 to 800 feet depending on the local aquifer, solar arrays sized to support baseline residential loads at price points below $3,000 per installation, and composting toilet systems that eliminate the septic infrastructure that would otherwise trigger county building code enforcement. The total infrastructure cost per residential site ranges from $4,000 for the minimum viable configuration through $15,000 for a comfortable long-term installation, and the labor requirements are typically absorbed through the mutual aid networks the LLC members coordinate during the initial construction phases. The location selection within the target counties represents the fourth element of the system and reflects the particular operational requirements the community's security protocols require. The preferred parcels sit at least 3 miles from the nearest paved road, at least 10 miles from the nearest developed community, and at least 20 miles from the nearest interstate corridor. The distance requirements produce the operational privacy the community requires while also imposing the transportation logistics constraints that make regular resupply operations part of the community's coordination workload. The parcels are typically selected through the coordinated review of county assessor maps, satellite imagery of the surrounding terrain, and community wisdom shared through the encrypted communication networks that connect the members across the entire American Southwest. The preferred terrain features include natural rock formations that provide passive concealment, water table depths compatible with well drilling within the community's budget range, and geographic isolation from the automated license plate reader deployments that the surveillance industry has been expanding across the paved road network throughout the region. The exact locations that meet all of these criteria are documented in the community's private databases, and the databases are shared only through the vetting processes that filter potential new members before they receive access to the coordinates. The communication networks the communities depend on represent the fifth element of the system and reflect the unique operational security requirements the community has developed across the past 3 years. The primary communication infrastructure operates through the General Mobile Radio Service, commonly referred to as GMRS, which provides FCC-licensed operation across the frequencies the community uses without requiring commercial service subscriptions or cellular network connectivity. The parallel communication infrastructure operates through the mesh-tastic devices that the technical members of the community have deployed across the past 18 months, which use the LoRa radio protocol to create mesh networks capable of transmitting text messages and location data across distances measured in tens of miles without requiring commercial infrastructure. The encrypted messaging applications the community uses for coordination beyond the direct radio range include Signal, Session, and the private matrix servers that designated technical members operate on behalf of the community, and the operational security protocols require that no communication involving location data, membership identification, or infrastructure specifications ever transit commercial cellular networks or unencrypted internet connections. The satellite communication infrastructure the more resourced members have deployed includes Iridium Geo devices that provide global text messaging across the same encrypted applications, Garmin inReach devices that provide two-way messaging plus SOS activation for genuine emergencies, and the Starlink installations that specific community coordinators operate under fixed positioning contracts that do not link the terminal identifier to the individual coordinator's personal identity. The layered communication architecture produces redundancy against every documented failure mode, from routine cellular outages through coordinated infrastructure attacks, and the community's operational planning across the past 18 months has explicitly assumed that the mainstream communication infrastructure will experience degraded reliability across the next 36 months, rather than the improved reliability that the previous decades of infrastructure investment produced. The security protocols the communities operate under represent the sixth element of the system and reflect the ongoing concerns the community has developed about the operational risks that the parallel society structure produces. The vetting process for new members typically extends across 3 to 6 months and involves multiple in-person meetings, background verification through the community's informal information networks, and progressive access grants that begin with visiting privileges and extend through overnight stays before permanent membership is granted. The exclusion criteria include documented affiliations with law enforcement, documented affiliations with journalism, and any pattern of social media activity that would compromise the operational privacy the community depends on. The internal security infrastructure includes perimeter monitoring through motion-activated cameras, positioned at the access points, radio-based communication networks for coordinated response to detected intrusions, and armed response protocols that vary by state and by the underlying legal framework the LLC has established for the parcel. The parallel security concerns include the operational risks that the pooled ownership structure produces, and the community's operating agreements typically include forced buyout provisions that allow the LLC to remove members who compromise the operational security through information disclosure, external legal action, or documented behavior patterns incompatible with the community's operational requirements. The buyout valuations reflect the original contribution amounts rather than any appreciation in the underlying land value, which produces a substantial financial disincentive against the disclosure behaviors that would trigger the forced removal process, and aligns the individual member incentives with the community's long-term operational security requirements. The additional layer of security infrastructure involves the systematic documentation of every visitor access to the parcels, the coordinated background verification of every proposed new member through the community's informal information networks, and the operational compartmentalization that limits any individual member's knowledge of the total membership, the complete parcel inventory, or the aggregate coordination structure to the information necessary for their particular participation. The compartmentalization principle mirrors the operational security structures that intelligence agencies employ across their own operational environments, and the Vanlife community members who developed the current protocols across the past 3 years have drawn explicitly on the published literature describing those structures to design their own equivalents. The scale that the hidden communities have reached across the past 3 years is difficult to measure precisely because the operational privacy the structure depends on prevents accurate enumeration, but the available indicators suggest that the total membership across the 3 primary target counties has reached figures ranging from 4,000 to 7,000 active participants across 200 to 300 separate LLC-owned parcels. The projected growth trajectory across the next 24 months, extrapolated from the current land purchase rates and the current membership growth rates within the existing communities, suggests that the total scale could reach 15,000 to 20,000 participants across the same 3 counties by the end of 2027, with parallel expansion into additional counties across New Mexico, Utah, and Oregon that have begun receiving the same coordinated purchase activity within the past 12 months. The comparison figure that provides useful context is the total permanent population of Slab City at its peak, which historical estimates placed at approximately 150 individuals, meaning the hidden community network has already scaled to over 25 times the size of the largest previous American off-grid settlement, while operating with a fraction of the visibility that Slab City generated across its 7 decades of continuous operation. The question of why the state agencies that would ordinarily track this scale of coordinated land acquisition have not publicly acknowledged the pattern has a documented answer that reflects the operational realities of the American West's regulatory environment. Rural county sheriff's departments across the target counties operate with total staffing levels smaller than the police force of a single suburban high school, and the departments have no operational capacity to investigate LLC ownership patterns across the geographic dispersion the community's operational security produces. County building departments operate through complaint-driven enforcement systems that generate zero enforcement action across parcels that produce zero complaints, and the geographic isolation of the parcels the community has selected produces complaint frequencies that approach zero across the entire target inventory. State agencies, including the California State Lands Commission, the Nevada Division of Minerals, and the Arizona State Land Department, operate with mandates focused on state-owned parcels rather than private land transactions, and the coordinated purchase of privately owned parcels through LLCs falls outside the state agency's documented enforcement priorities. Federal agencies, including the Bureau of Land Management, operate with mandates focused on federal land rather than the private parcels the community has been acquiring, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation operates with mandates that require concrete, documented federal violations before investigations are opened. The regulatory vacuum that results, in which no single agency at any level of government has both the mandate and the operational capacity to track the pattern, produces the invisibility that the entire hidden community structure depends on for its continued expansion. Meanwhile, the country continues to allocate hundreds of billions of dollars per year to defense budgets and stadium subsidies, while the American van life community that watched the previous 3 years of enforcement operations dismantle the arrangement that 15 years of movement building had produced, has coordinated its own response through the private legal structures, the raw land acquisitions, and the invisible infrastructure installations that this documentary has been about. The hidden communities are not asking for state recognition. The hidden communities are not seeking media coverage. The hidden communities are not pursuing the legal reforms that would legitimize the arrangement across the mainstream regulatory environment. The hidden communities are constructing a parallel society designed to operate beneath the surveillance ecosystem, beneath the enforcement infrastructure, and beneath the institutional mechanisms that made conventional van life untenable across the previous 3 years. Whether the arrangement scales to the projected 15 to 20,000 participants by the end of 2027, whether the operational security holds against the eventual scrutiny that increased scale will attract, and whether the state agencies eventually develop the operational capacity to track the pattern remain the open questions that the next 24 months will answer. The community members who have been building the arrangement across the past 3 years have made the deliberate choice to bet that the invisibility holds, that the scale continues expanding, and that the parallel society reaches the operational maturity required to survive the eventual response. The institutional interests that failed to prevent its formation will eventually mount against it. Which means the American van life community carries the institutional memory of what the arrangement looked like when the mainstream operating environment was collapsing, what the transition looked like when the hidden communities began forming, and what the parallel society is producing right now across 3 American counties as the alternative that the 15 years of enforcement operations forced the community to construct. Drop the county in the comments if you have visited one of the hidden communities. Drop the year you first heard about the coordinated land purchases. Drop the state you would consider joining if the vetting process opened to public membership. Drop the parcel size range you would target if you were building your own equivalent arrangement from scratch. Drop the infrastructure investment amount you would consider viable for a permanent residential installation on desert land you had acquired through the coordinated purchase process. Drop the operational security protocol you would prioritize before any other consideration if you were joining a community whose continued operation depended on the invisibility this documentary has been about. Every response in the comments is a data point that documents what happened to a community that at its previous peak included over 3 million Americans, and that at its current point has been reduced to the parallel infrastructure this channel documents every week. And if this documentary earned a place in the map you carry in your head, subscribe. It is about the only thing left in the American van life community that is still free.